Teachers of Reddit, what are the biggest differences you've seen in your students pre- and post-pandemic?
High school teacher here. These kids hit two major disruptions, going remote, and coming back. Most kids learned almost no content when teaching was remote. There are always those few who will learn no matter what, but honestly, having the ability to have a video game or fun website on in a different tab with no one able to tell was too big a temptation. Not to mention the kids who were forced into childcare roles of younger relatives during school hours, or those in families that had more people than tech and had to prioritize who could work when. Some amazing kids rose to the occasion, other kids just acted like regular kids. They are slowly recovering now. But a significant minority did better when school was remote. One girl had a hard time focusing, so she brought her phone into the kitchen and cooked all period while also answering all the questions and participating in all the activities. And one boy, for whom socialization was the hardest thing, burned through online classes once he wasn't held back by having to deal with people. These kids had a much harder time on their return, and unfortunately in the boy's case, his success during remote school meant some of his services were taken away only for him to crash and burn once he was brought back.
Al, someone who feels the exact same as you do in daily life, I say you can really compare the two situation. The difference is that you are an adult. It's easier for you to prioritize things because your brain is at a stage where you can handle that yourself. Of course, personality and environment are also a big role, but how can we really expect children starting age 4 to be able to handle the planning, bringing up concentration and motivation by themselves? No matter what type of person they are, even a lot of adults have a hard time with that. And every child has a different home situation they just have to accept because they can't change that. Now at 22 I have kinda learned what works for me and what would make a situation worse for me. I am also able to find solutions myself way better. Partly because of age, partly because of the freedom because a child is dependent on how serious adults take them, and partly because of experience. Experience those children never had.
I have noticed changes in my undergrads, but as a scientist, I want to be careful not to mistake correlation for causation. I don't know if it's the pandemic, generational changes, or something else. My students now seem very emotionally and intellectually fragile in a way they weren't before. They are terrified of any sort of challenge or assessment. They do not want to engage with active learning much at all. They don't want to be graded. This is not the same as saying they are just checked out of the educational process, quite the opposite. These students seem very eager to learn, but the process of being in the presence of unfamiliar information and challenging themselves to understand it seems to drive them to distraction.
To put things into perspective, I am a chemistry teacher. There are big gaps in knowledge, especially mathematical. Asking basic algebraic questions leaves a lot of blank faces when in previous years it was a non-issue for most students. The attention span has dropped to almost nothing. In previous years it was understood that cell phones shouldn't be out, and if you were on a Chromebook you should be doing work. That's a huge issue at the moment. Almost everyone seems burned out. While there are still a few exceptions, there seems to be an overall desire to not be in class that I have not seen before. It was always an issue in the beginning of the year but would subside as we got to interesting stuff. I have not felt motivated to do the interesting stuff this year. I still am, because they show just as much enthusiasm as when I just give a worksheet.
Academically, not as much of a difference, though this will depend on literally dozens of factors, including age, district, state, etc. My biggest difference: lack of trust for adults in their lives. I think COVID was the first time they saw, much like 9/11 with my generation, that the adults and societal safeguards we are supposed to have in place to keep us safe just aren't there. It was one big global, oh shit, the adults don't know what they're doing either. Kids can sense that, much better than we give them credit for, and it has had a big impact on how I build relationships with students. It's just harder to convince them that I have their best interest at heart, that I can be trusted, and the school wants to keep them safe and help them succeed.
Inner city teacher here. As others have said, the attention span is lower. Many kids don't watch TV, they just play on their phone. Most may watch a show while being on their phone. It's all about next content. Something else is the spoon feeding they want. If a quick Google search doesn't give an immediate answer, it's hopeless. They won't click a link to read 3 paragraphs to find an answer, they want Google to give them the paragraph out of context, with the bolded part. On top of this is parents. Kids in many new aspects have a relationship with their parents that is friend-based and not parent-child. Kids run wild and do what they please with little repercussions. Parents expect you, the teacher, to drive their kids even though we see the kid for an hour a day. It's all just passing the buck.
I teach university, and it has changed a little over time, but I've noticed more students writing with pen and paper rather than a laptop or tablet. It's like they got tired of just staring at screens or something. Initially, when we went back to in-person teaching, students were also much more likely to ask questions. Socially, I also think that young adults are also a little more social and looking to make up for lost time. Some downsides: many students are quick to expect the possibility of a Zoom hybrid or recorded lecture even though the policy is clear on the syllabus. They are also less likely to use the physical library resources, instead relying on things that are available digitally for essays or assignments.
I teach high school juniors, and it's almost a micro-generation. It looks like the freshmen coming up are more akin to the normal students I'm used to, but sophomores through seniors were all shaped by that distance here. Their earbuds and phones have gone beyond distractions to things they rely on to feel safe. They absolutely cannot go more than 10 to 20 minutes without needing to put on some kind of streaming or gaming service. The bad kids, stereotypically speaking, just blatantly ignore me and do literally nothing. But even the good kids are struggling hard with executive dysfunction. We're gonna need serious social safety nets for these kids, and soon. I really feel like I spend more time comforting kids who are just utterly broken than teaching them.
I teach kindergarten and a bunch of my students hadn't really been around other kids since maybe age 2. A lot of them were thrown about the concept of being with a group of kids all mostly doing the same thing. We would call everyone to sit in a circle on the carpet and some of them would go over to the little kitchen to play with the microwave or try to lay underneath a table. The ta and I would tell them it's story time and the children are on the carpet now, and the kids would genuinely be like, "Got it. You all are doing story time. I will be over there in the little kitchen putting these fruits in the microwave." For some of them it took a long time for it to sink in that they were in a group of children who were doing school. Some of the children seem starved for adult attention and act out for attention more so than in the past. I have a few that are quite naughty until they receive a lot of individualized mom-type nurturing. Which is probably what they need since some of their younger years were more rocky. A lot of the preschools were running on a skeleton crew that had a ton of kids and not enough staffing, so the children didn't receive the structure and probably attention they'd normally have had.
My preschool class went from having 1 to 2 high-needs students to 5 to 8. Students didn't understand why they had to leave their parents when we could study online. Parents were coping from their own depressions, xenophobia and other issues and pushing it on their kids. Domestic abuse was exacerbated and ignored at the same time. And then along all of this weakened immune systems, and hard-lined beliefs on vaccines or health, well, we had 5 separate outbreaks of different illness in 1 year, the first time I had ever had an outbreak in 15 years of teaching. At the end of it all, the classes became more difficult to manage. The outbreaks of disease and the weird push to be more cautious from half the parents, and to ignore any ways we could protect the kids by the other half. A few of the more troublesome kids picked up on this and started spitting on each other, or me when they were angry. One kid would try and wash other students' toothbrushes in a toilet when angry, and all of this behavior was something I had never seen. It was hard. Bosses and managers struggled to juggle it all, but I found it more profitable and better on my mind to switch to online only myself.
The biggest problems I've seen is in students that were remote during first grade, and didn't have the support they needed to keep them on task at home. The transition from kindergarten to first is usually when things get serious, for lack of a better term, and students start to learn how to motivate themselves through tasks, as well as the obvious other things like first grade math. For students who were not supervised or held up to any standards at home, they basically came into second grade not knowing how to handle themselves in class, as well as not knowing any of the first grade level hard skills like math and reading that they needed to learn the second grade stuff. This meant for those students they had a high likelihood of immediately getting frustrated, giving up, tuning out, and misbehaving. I taught third grade and it was night and day who got the support during first grade remote learning and who didn't. Higher grades were affected, but from what I could tell they tended to be quite a bit behind, as opposed to completely non-functional.
Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.